In this video, we'll talk about the Sync Manager tab and the different groups we'll need on the tab: Post, Simulation, Tokens, and the Display group. We have been quickly moving through the Sync Manager to simulate our process. Let's stop and look at some of the tools Sync Manager offers. I have posted our part into Code Expert. We can see that when the Sync Manager tab is selected in the main window here, that in addition to the other tabs, a Sync Manager tab has opened on the ribbon. What we can learn from this is that every app has its own ribbon. If I go back to the Start page, you can see that I have only the File, Home, and View tabs available. When we post into Code Expert, an IOF file, which stands for Intermediate Object Format, is created and opened in the Sync Manager. This file is similar to an enriched ASCII NCI file. Changes that were formerly made in the control definition or by editing the post are now made here in the Sync Manager, which acts as the window into the IOF. The IOF file allows you to see and enter values for machine-specific options that have been defined for your machine. For example, coolant settings, which we'll find right here. We can also see reference positions there. Down below we can see approach and retract strategies. If I open this up, we'll see that we have some strategies we can choose from. And we can use sync codes when needed for dual stream machines. We'll come back to the App Manager to discuss these settings in more detail. In the Sync Manager, we can also launch into simulation. We can post the IOF file to create the NC code. As we are working with a single turret, single stream machine, we'll be using a subset of the tools available in the Sync Manager. The parameters and settings available and displayed in the Sync Manager will vary greatly from machine to machine, as each machine has been custom developed based on its own requirements. They are being updated regularly. We are working in a generic machine. Expect your machine settings to be different. Many of the settings and parameters we will be talking about are customizable by your reseller. Let's take a look at what's in the groups in the Sync Manager tab. In the Post group, in MT, this G1 button is the same as the G1 button back in the part file in the Toolpath Manager here. The Launch button we are familiar with, and in the bottom right hand corner of that group you can see there's a little arrow. And inside that arrow we have some simulation options. The force reload will reload the machine and settings when changes have been made to the .machine file. In the orientation section, the initial view will allow us to dictate what view opens when simulation is first launched. There are some different options inside of here. And the use last view session, if you leave simulation, make some changes in Sync Manager, then relaunch simulation, your last view will be maintained. I personally like to use the optimized view, and I will leave the use last view in session unchecked. You can try it for yourself and see which settings you like. In the Tokens group, we can reset all our values. So any changes we make down here, they'll be reset to their default values. In the Display group, we can turn things on and off. We also have this little arrow down in the right hand corner here, so we can change our translucency options. You can see them changing as I move this. We've got some different settings we can try here. We can also see that I have all of my operations turned on right now. We can see the approaches and the toolpaths here. I can just pick one if I choose to, which is kind of nice. It slows things down. You can see the relationship between the toolpath on the screen and the toolpath in the operations list. We have some options where we can turn some different things on and off in the Display group. Next thing I'd like to look at is the consumer layer. Over in Machine Explorer, under the control layers, I'm going to double click on Consumer. This is where you set defaults for various machine and NC settings called tokens, formerly found in the control definition and the post. You can see that a new tab is opened up here, and they're organized into 3 different categories in the drop down here: control definition, output settings, and NC config. When a setting is changed, we'll get an asterisk next to the control. So for example, if I check this box here, you can see the asterisk up there designating that this has changed. So when I leave, if I want to maintain these settings that I've changed, I'm going to need to save that control file. Some settings require that the machine file is reloaded and the part reposted for the changes to be effective. Those are the exception to the rule though. There are many settings in the consumer layer. Each machine will have similar and distinct settings. Here are a couple examples. In the output settings, we have the tool table here, and simply by selecting which type I want from the drop down, and you can see that as I hover over them I get a little explanation of what that particular selection is going to do. And I also have some coolant options up here. So you'll notice that right now our default settings show M08 on approach, before approach, and M09 before retract. We've got a couple options in here. If I set this one here, you can see again if I hover I have coolant, flood, and coolant through on. So I'll set this as my default so we can see something change here, and then I'll go ahead and save it. And you'll notice once I save it, the asterisk goes away because it's now part of the machine. The application manual has a section that can help you with your particular settings. Again, I'll be talking about that in a little bit.